You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Truck Weather Bulletin for August 21st, live. Well, here we are with 3 active systems, another one dead. We have Hurricane Grace, which we now have as a Category 2 by our analysis. Henri, which remains an upper-end tropical storm. The remnants of Linda, which have become gone as it heads towards Hawaii. And of course, 16W, which finally became Tropical Storm Omaze after such a long time. It's day 82 of Atlantic hurricane season, and there is Grace there 100 miles an hour at this point. Henri there is up to an upper-end tropical storm, and there's also an AOI with a 20% chance of formation. Of course, 8 tropical storms have formed so far this year, with 3 of those being hurricanes. It's day 98 of Eastern Pacific hurricane season there, and you can see Linda there, pretty much remnant low at this point. The remnants of Grace are expected to reform in the Eastern Pacific an 80% chance now, while another AOI is present, a 40% chance of that forming as well. So quite a bit of activity going on here. In the Western Pacific, the only thing going on here is Tropical Storm Omaze, which is expected to continue to the north-northwest before curving towards the northeast. Other than that, it's going to be short-lived and not exactly that strong, so that is good news if there is any with the presence of this storm. And the North Indian Ocean, there is not much going on here as to be expected for this time of year. After all, it is August still, and you usually don't see that second peak of the season coming for at least another month or so. So that is going to be a pattern that stays with us for quite some time. Here's the Atlantic satellite imagery, and you can see the progress of Grace's reorganization and strengthening trend as it heads westward over the Bay of Campeche, and then of course Henri there, which begun its turn towards the north and is pretty much now going to be staying in that direction towards the north for much of the rest of its lifetime. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see Linda there, which is just a ghastly remnant low at this point. Other than that, not really much, considering the fact that the next disturbance is literally going to be Hurricane Grace itself. Not really else much I can say about that. The next disturbance will literally be from an Atlantic system. In the Western Pacific, you can see Omaze there to the east-northeast of the Philippines. It looks more like a giant blob in reality, and that has been the case for quite some time, but it is definitely producing a good amount of convection, enough for it to sustain itself clearly, although we'll be dealing with shear in the next few days, and it's probably not going to get any stronger than a moderate tropical storm at best. Moving over to the North Indian Ocean satellite imagery, you can see what we're looking at here, and that is just more monsoonal activity going on over the Bay of Bengal. Otherwise, the Arabian Sea looks relatively dry, and that's going to be remaining the case for quite some time, considering the fact that is, of course, what you would expect for this time of year. And then, of course, zooming in into the main focuses of this live truck weather bulletin, it is Grace and Henri. Grace is getting itself really organized there and strengthening, of course. Henri the same way. Recon is going into both flights, and we will be going into what they found soon enough as well. Moving on to the sea surface temperatures, you can see the Eastern Pacific ones here, and they look like this. 30 degrees Celsius remains very closely tight to the Mexican coastlines. Other than that, the temperatures remain around 27 to 28 for much of the basin. The Gulf of Mexico is piping hot with sea surface temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius. Much of the Caribbean is around 28 to 29, and the tropical Atlantic as well as much of the western Atlantic is around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. This is tropics slightly cooler as you head up to the Azores, where they're around 24 to 26 degrees Celsius at this time. Moving over to the North Indian Ocean, you can see that the 30 degrees Celsius temperatures we had in the Bay of Bengal have now receded, with the Arabian Sea still looking at those chilly temperatures as you head towards Oman. The Philippine Sea is starting to see some warmer temperatures again, a lot more areas that are seeing 30 degrees Celsius temperatures than before. Of course, those 30 degrees Celsius ones are more prominent as you head west of the Hainan Peninsula in the South China Sea. So that is what we're looking at in terms of the sea surface temperatures. Of course, the southern hemisphere remains pretty inhabitable for tropical cyclone development still, with many of the basins still being around 25 to 26. And then, of course, looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies, the Atlantic remains relatively warm. The subtropics are extremely warm in terms of the Pacific and the Atlantic, And then, of course, the subtropics in the western Pacific are looking a lot cooler than we have been. And really, that is pretty much all we can say with that. So, with that, this brings us to our team here, and of course, this is going to be a special edition of the Tropical Weather Bulletin, a 2-hour one compared to our normal 1-hour one, given the fact that we are looking at 2 significant threats here. And as of right now, we are looking at the Tampico radar, if I'm not mistaken, and that is the one for Grace, of course. And joining us tonight, we do have Amethyst, Dakota, Sam, Noah, as well as Orlando. Joining us from all places around the world and presenting here tonight is Xavier Burns. So, how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing alright.
Feeling a little bad, but of course, there's a lot of trouble going around.
Yeah, quite a bit of activity. And so, what are we seeing right now with Grace? How has it been evolving over the last 12 hours?
So, over the last 12 hours, Grace has been increasingly convectively active and has established itself a eye structure in inner core. The eye is roughly 32 nautical miles wide, which is a little bit above the average eye size, which is between 20 to 30 miles, nautical miles. And we had very strong vertical hot towers, which are hot towers just circulating around the inner core of the hurricane. Very intense hot towers, and a obvious rapid intensification trend. And now Recon went into there, found a 97 knot flight level wind in the southwestern quadrant, which correlates to 100 miles per hour at the surface. And they also find a dropsum with a dropsum confirmation. We also found a minimum central pressure of 967 millibars. So there has been a rapid intensification trend with the storm, and it's pretty likely that this will continue until landfall, and we might be looking at a high-end Category 2 to low-end Category 3 now at landfall. It has been a pretty impressive intensification phase, I have to say.
And unfortunately, Grace has been moving slower than previously anticipated, which means it's going to be in water for longer than previously expected. We were initially looking at a landfall tonight, but it seems that that has now been pushed towards the early hours or possibly late hours of the morning tomorrow. So that is unfortunate news that we're getting from this. This gives it more time to intensify. And just going over the National Hurricane Center's latest advisory on Grace, the headline was that Air Force Reconnaissance aircraft finds Grace intensifying, with landfall along eastern mainland Mexico expected later tonight. They have winds now 100 miles an hour, a pressure of 967 millibars, and that now moving to the west at about 10 miles an hour. Also, just touching on Henri briefly, as we'll also be covering that significantly with this. They have it now at 70 miles an hour and a pressure of 994 millibars, moving to the north at 7 miles an hour as well. And of course, that is looking to be a significant threat. You had the cones there, Sam. So if you could bring us back to those, since we might as well discuss those. Here's the latest cone on Henri. This is going to be a very significant impact, as the cone has once again shifted west, and now Long Island is now in the direct beeline for this. Landfall as a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane now expected, with tropical storm watches going all the way as far as New Jersey, and then of course Massachusetts and the Cape Cod area being under a hurricane watch. Now, what is unfortunate about this is that once it makes landfall at some point Sunday afternoon or evening, it will be slowing down significantly, which will bring quite a bit of rainfall. Up to 6 to 10 inches of rain cannot be ruled out, possibly locally higher in spots. After that, it is expected to turn post-tropical some point near the Vermont-New Hampshire border, as of the current track, of course, before entering the Gulf of Maine as a post-tropical cyclone. So, of course, the forecast can change, as it has been several times, And of course, we do know that the center of the cone could be on either edge of that. So of course, if it takes the most western route, that would put it in a landfall in northern New Jersey, with the most eastern end pretty much taking it into the eastern region of Massachusetts. So that is something that we're going to be having to watch there. And just outlining the warnings as I get those pulled up here on my end so I can read them out loud. There is a storm surge warning that is in effect from south shore of Long Island from Mastic Beach to Montauk Point, a north shore of Long Island from Oyster Bay to Montauk Point, Greenwich, Connecticut to Chatham, Massachusetts, as well as Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Block Island. So all those areas I just mentioned are under a storm surge warning. A storm surge watch is in effect for the south shore of Long Island from west of Mastic Beach to East Rockaway Inlet, the north shore of Long Island from west of Oyster Bay to Flushing, Flushing, New York to west of Greenwich, Connecticut, as well as the Cape Cod Bay and north of Chatham, Massachusetts to Sagamore Beach in the same state. Looking at the hurricane warnings that we currently have in effect, that is for south shore of Long Island from Fire Island Inlet to Montauk Point, as well as a hurricane warning for north shore of Long Island from Port Jefferson Harbor to Montauk Point, and New Haven, Connecticut to west of Watch Hill, Rhode Island. A hurricane watch is in effect for Watch Hill, Rhode Island to Sagamore Beach, Massachusetts, as well as Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Block Island. And of course, the tropical storm warning is in effect for Port Jefferson Harbor to west of New Haven, Connecticut to as well as south shore of Long Island from west of Fire Island Inlet to East Rockaway Inlet. A tropical storm watch is in effect for Muskegon Inlet, New Jersey to west of East Rockaway Inlet, New York, including New York City. So some very major populations in this, and a lot of warnings that we had to get through there. That was probably quite a wall there. And of course, we also have warnings in effect with Grace. Here's the cone on that. Of course, winds are now up to 100 miles an hour, making this a Category 2 hurricane, the strongest Category 4 storm we've had so far this Atlantic hurricane season. And as of right now, we are looking at a hurricane warning that is in effect for the coast of mainland Mexico from Puerto Veracruz to Cabo Rojo, as well as a tropical storm warning that is now in effect for the coast of mainland Mexico from north of Cabo Rojo to Barra del Tordo. So that is what we are looking at in terms of the warnings. If you are in any of these warnings, no matter which storm you are, you need to be making sure your preparations are complete. With Grace, your preparation should have been complete already. If you are New England, you still have time. This is looking to be a significant impact. Of course, the last hurricane to make landfall there was a significant time ago. I think the last one would have been, I don't know. I know the last tropical storm was Hermine of 2004.
I know that. The last hurricane to make landfall in New England was Bob of 1991, so that's 30 years ago.
Just after its 30-year anniversary of its landfall as well, if I'm not mistaken. So this is definitely not good timing in terms of historical records and just the timing of everything in general, especially when you have a massive amount of people in it. And just the fact that we have never seen this track, I've mentioned this in the previous talk of the bulletins, we have never seen a track like this in the Atlantic, because of course this formed to the northeast of Bermuda, and before the storm we could say that we've never seen a storm that hit any portion of the U.S. From that location, and well, it looks like that is going to be changing after this weekend and into the early portion of this coming week. So definitely not good news there. A moderate risk for excessive rainfall has already been issued for this thing. Obviously, the Weather Prediction Center helps provide such forecast, and I don't know if anyone has that pulled up. If someone could, at some point, pull up the other products for this, that would be good, because we're going to be needing those. That would be the Weather Prediction Center, not the Storm Prediction Center. As we're getting that up, you can click on Today 3 there, and you can see what we mean by that. And you can see that there is a good chunk of region under a moderate risk, and you can kind of clearly see where Henri will be impacting. Obviously, a 5% risk of flash flooding is denoted in that green there, where heavy rainfall has a 5% chance of leading to flash flooding in a certain region near your area. Once you get into the yellows, that becomes a slight risk, and that is a 10%. And then those chances double again as you head into that moderate risk, and you can see Hartford, Connecticut is basically in the center of that. And pretty much anywhere in the red, it can be seeing up to 6 to 10 inches of rain, locally higher in spots. And of course, we know that New England has been seeing quite a bit of rain recently, especially after the remnants of Fred just came through not too long ago. So of course, the areas are already saturated enough. So that does not look good when we have a hurricane that is now heading for that region and expected to make landfall at the end of this weekend. So, shifting it back to Grace, of course, as that is the strongest storm at the moment. It looks to be, do we have signs that it could be trying to develop an eye at the moment?
On Grace, yeah, it has been showing an eye feature for some time, but now as the storm intensifies, we get more of this. The cirrus in the eye is more and more clearing. It has been apparent on visible imagery that there has been only cirrus in the eye for several hours now, but now this very thick cirrus layer is clearing, and we're now in the process of clearing out an eye. Cloud tops in the eye are uh, should now be around negative 68 or so degrees C, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely clearing out.
Yeah, not good news, especially with the delay in the landfall now, especially with how fast this has been intensifying. I know someone did ask for our forecast. When we had this at 85 miles an hour, we were only expecting it to reach around 105 miles an hour. However, that estimate may be conservative at this point, and there is pretty much a good reason to go with 110. Potentially 115 is not out of the question yet, so we have to watch and see what happens. It all depends on how long it takes for this to make landfall. But as of right now, if the National Hurricane Center forecast, which has it making landfall tonight, goes on, then we will be seeing a landfall probably around 105, 110 miles an hour. But if it does take that a slower time, like we could potentially be seeing with the slower movement of this thing, then it may be very well 110 to 115 miles an hour when it does make landfall north of Zalapa tomorrow morning, of course. So that is something that we're going to be watching very closely as we head into the overnight hours. Landfall coverage is, of course, anticipated depending on when this does make landfall. It just that is just the matter of when we will go live. So we will be watching that, of course, and Henri, we will be continuing to stick a lot of coverage on that, as that is going to be a significant threat. So regardless, there's going to be a lot of live events in the days ahead, and we know there's been quite a few recently as it is, so just a lot going to be coming on. I know an update on Henri is currently being made by Christian right now, so that is why he's not with us right now, but that should be coming up at the top of the hour. For those who are only going to be here for the first hour. Of course, I did mention this is going to be a 2-hour truck weather bulletin, so that way we could answer your questions and all. So, just to get this started, of course, because I know there's going to be a large amount of questions that are probably going to be received here. If you have any questions, please feel free to tag us at Force13. That will pop our name up in orange, and that will give us the ability to see your comments, questions, concerns, anything you would like to bring to us. We will read over that, and of course we will say our thoughts. We have a pretty good, well-rounded team here, so we should be able to have some way of answering said questions. A first question, which I can see why, is Grace going through rapid intensification right now?
Yes. Simple answer, yes.
Yeah, we've been seeing this really get itself together, especially ever since it really got its convection wrapped around the center again. After it came off the Yucatan Peninsula, it kind of looked like that didn't seem like a distinct possibility, but it really made a comeback. Really made itself there. So we've been watching this very closely organize and get itself much more stronger than we would have initially thought, considering the fact we were looking at a 90-mile-an-hour landfall initially in Mexico. Do you believe this can make landfall at 115? I basically did answer that before you did ask. I said that the longer it takes to make landfall, the more chance of that happening. In terms of Category 4, very unlikely though. I think that 115 is probably a good reasonable cap for this, especially given the fact that we are going to be seeing landfall in the next 12 to 18 hours at the very absolute latest. Well, not even 18 hours, it's going to be less than an hour. So I'm saying like about 9 to 15 hours at best before this begins to make landfall. Another question that we had was, when do you think this will make landfall, and could it affect Mexico City?
Is there any information from the NHC about the landfall time?
What they have said is that Grace is moving towards the west near 10 miles an hour, and this general motion is expected to continue, so they don't have it slowing down any further. And they said that the center of Grace is forecast to move across the southwestern Gulf of Mexico this evening, and then it will be making landfall tonight. They're not exactly saying what time that it will make landfall. They're just saying that a 10 mile an hour movement speed is to be assumed for the rest of its course over the Gulf of Mexico. In terms of impacts in Mexico City, I guess we can figure out how long before they have landfall by figuring out where the center is and measuring it from the landfall location based on its movement speed. But as of right now, Mexico City, that does happen to be in the cone. However, by then it will likely have a lot weaker winds than what we were saying right now. As it passes, it will likely be a weakening 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Although the cone is no longer directly over you like it was yesterday. But regardless, you could still be seeing gusty winds, some heavy rainfall. So definitely not something to be taking your eyes off of. There is definitely going to be some impacts in Mexico City from Grace, of course. And of course, this is expected to remain a tropical cyclone for quite some time before it dissipates somewhere to the west of Morelia in the Michoacan, or yeah, somewhere I can't pronounce Mexican states that well, but it's in the Michoacan state of Mexico. Going to the next question. What CDPS stage is Grace right now? It is currently a stage 5. Henri is presently a stage 3. Let's see here. You had a question: if Grace stalls, will it go north? A, it's not stalling, and B, there is no way it can go north. Another question was, remember my question yesterday about if it will be 960s millibars range. Now do you think it will be the 950s?
So, based on how fast the intensification was so far, assuming it still has 6 hours to landfall, it would put the storm down to roughly 960, 958 type-ish millibar. So there might still be enough time for the storm to deepen all the way down into the 950s.
I can really say, the longer it takes for this to make landfall, the more of a chance for that to occur. Phil the Man asks, what are your thoughts on the new Atlantic AOI? Personally, at least from my opinion, I see why it's 20%, considering the fact that it is going to be going through some relatively dry air ahead of this thing, so yeah, so any development of this is probably going to be slow to be at best, and thankfully it doesn't appear that there is any kind of immediate land threat with this, which would be quite a nice change considering the fact that we've been dealing with every single storm being a land threat since Bill at this point. So unfortunately it's been a very lengthy season in terms of land impacts, and of course we're only on August 21st UTC time, so we've got quite a bit to go, and we're not even at peak season yet. That is not for another few weeks, so we'll see what goes on with that. Another question from SR: how damaging is Henri likely to be?
Well, the entire infrastructure of the Northeast is rather ill-prepared for a high-end tropical system for this area. it would be a higher end impact for the Northeast. That's likely. Um, when you have hurricane force winds, widespread hurricane force winds there, it's likely that you have some power outages. But we can of course say at the current time how bad exactly the impact will be, but I would expect there to be at least some power outages because I've seen that some meteorologists have been tweeting about the um, that the infrastructure there is relatively ill prepared for such an high impact event.
And based off of what I know from the Northeast and previous storms that have hit there, damage racks up quite quickly with any storm that hits the Northeast compared to any other region, really. So this definitely is likely going to be a billion-dollar event if it goes at its current track. That is something I can definitely say for sure. Power outages, I don't think there's just going to be some. It's probably going to be a widespread event. Especially for Long Island, considering the fact that we are looking at a hurricane landfall there. And hurricane landfalls are very much uncommon, so the fact that we are getting one just goes to show that we are not looking at something that we are used to seeing. New England is not supposed to be really, or not supposed to be used to this kind of stuff, as it happens so far less compared to other states. South of it, of course, the Gulf Coast is experienced to seeing them. Southeast is used to seeing these, but New England is not. And I mean, before 2020's tropical storms of Isaias and Faye that affected the region, the last tropical storm to really affect them was, of course, Sandy in 2012. But by that point, it made an extratropical landfall, and then Irene the year previous. So it's not something that you typically see. Which really goes to show why anyone in the path of this, at least for Henri, seriously needs to prepare for this. It is a very life-threatening storm if you are not taking the necessary precautions. So if you live near the water, you definitely need to be heeding any kind of information from officials, whether you're in an evacuation zone or not, especially considering the fact that there are, of course, storm surge warnings and watches in place. And looking at the surge that we could be seeing from this, I'm pulling up what we could be seeing in terms of that right now, at least on my own end of things. All the way from Cape May to East Rockaway Inlet, 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. So anywhere there in that New Jersey area, that is what you're going to be expecting. From East Rockaway Inlet throughout all of Long Island and along Island Sound, that's 2 to 4 feet of storm surge you're going to be expecting. As you go into Narragansett Bay, that is 3 to 5 feet. Same case for Buzzards Bay as well as Nantucket Sound. So all the way, if you're in the coast of Rhode Island, if in the coast of Massachusetts, including the Cape Cod region, you're likely going to be seeing 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. Although the more north you are in Cape Cod near Sagamore Beach, it's probably going to be around 2 to 4 feet. So either way, quite a bit of storm surge is to be expected. And looking at that map there, you can clearly see what we could be seeing from that. So we're going to leave this map there for a little bit, as for those who are near the coastal areas and watching us. So that way you can figure out whether you live near enough that storage would, of course, affect you. And of course, we still got quite a bit of questions to go through. And that, let's see here, where did I left off on? I lost where I was. Let's see here. Do you think rays can reform over the Pacific with the same name? It's going to go through all the mountains. As of right now, the National Hurricane Center forecasts the circulation to dissipate, and then, of course, a new circulation would take its place. So it's likelihood that some piece of Grace is going to re-strengthen back into a tropical cyclone again. But it's at the moment, it's likely that it's going to get a different name. Of course, if it were to somehow keep its circulation intact, it would retain the name of Grace if it were to form in the Eastern Pacific. But the most likely scenario of this is that it does lose its circulation and form a new one and get classified as the next name, the Eastern Pacific. I should note, we've had similar situations before. To give an example of what happened in 2020 when Hurricane Nana made landfall in Belize, the remnants crossed over into the eastern Pacific, and the remnants of that, the circulation had dissipated, but a new one formed, and that became what was Tropical Storm Julio in the eastern Pacific. So that is something that we have seen with that. Another question that we had, the reason why the Central Pacific is not having Hone is because Central Pacific is really just not hospitable and to begin with, especially when we are in these type of environmental conditions. And as long as we get closer to La Nina, those chances that we do see Hone are definitely not going to be large at all. A lot of questions about the same that we just answered. Another question for Condor Campbell: can Henri rapidly intensify?
There's certainly the environment that we're gonna have tomorrow is certainly very favorable. So if Henri has a window for rapid intensification, that window is definitely tomorrow. And then after it goes north of the Gulf Stream line, where it has colder sea surface temperatures, that window closes again, which is the next day. So tomorrow is a rather short window of for rapid intensification being possible for Henri, where shear is low and sea surface temperatures are high, and after that it's likely to weaken, maybe even rapidly.
Let's see here. Next question here. Well, I don't know why this is being asked given the situation right now. So we're probably gonna move on from that. What was the deadliest hurricane in history? And I believe that's probably a North Indian Ocean cyclone.
What was the question again? The
It was
deadliest cyclone in history?
Yeah.
The deadliest cyclone in world history ever was the Bowler cyclone of 1970,
Uh,
with 500,000 casualties.
yeah. Moving on from that. How high could the storm surge for Hurricane Grace be?
I think someone here should have official NHC graphics with that.
They don't do
do
any.
not have a graphic for that.
National Hurricane Center only has storm surge for anything that's hitting the U.S. usually.
Oh. Um, I think it should be remarked in the key messages, or yeah, it isn't. But expect 3 to 6 feet, I would say.
Yeah, definitely gonna be some pretty good storm surge there. Definitely 6 to 10 feet is a good possibility of that. Does Grace have dual channel outflow? That comes from crouch spam.
Yes.
Let's see here. I guess we're rapid pacing through these a large amount of questions. Will be okay. I'm gonna fix the grammar. This is from President Neon de Leon Wancho. Hopefully, I got that name right. Will there be a tropical storm that hits South America?
Not in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, of course we can't figure out what's gonna happen for sure, and given the fact that there's currently nothing in the model guidance that suggests such, not right now. CJ Cruz asks chances of Henri becoming a major hurricane.
Well, there certainly is with this small window of rapid intensification, and also that the storm isn't observed by Recon to be having the worst structure at the current time. So there's definitely some potential, but if I had to guess, I would say it don't strengthens into a major hurricane. But they with the window of rapid intensification, I wouldn't rule it out completely, but it's relatively unlikely.
Let's see here. Is there a chance for Grace to be retired?
Well, if it causes a lot of damage, certainly.
I think that's the storm that's been coming to mind, especially with analogs and stuff like this, was Carl 2010. And we know that before the 2020 retirements came out, it was the costliest snub in history. Of course, that #1 spot it has been broken by several storms now. But regardless, it was relatively damaging, and I believe I believe that there has been reason as to analogs, especially another analog that we've been seeing with this was, of course, Franklin 2017 in terms of its track, of course. So it's a little bit of a very big question as to whether Grace will get retired. Of course, it's gonna be a bit before we figure out how much damage caused, especially considering the fact we don't know the impacts in places like Haiti yet. We know that Haiti did get impacted by this, and that was just days after the earthquake there, the 7.2. So it is definitely a very large uncertainty. We won't find that information out until next year. But if there is any chance of storms being retired, I think the one better chance out of the storms we have active right now would probably be Henri, given the fact that any hurricane landfall on New England has a better, usually a good shot of getting retired, especially with the magnitude of what we're looking at here. Not only are we looking at a very rare hurricane landfall for Long Island, we're looking at this thing that's going to be significantly slowing down once it goes inland. So this is just a very uncommon track that we're not used to seeing, and a very significant one at that. Let's see here. Another question was also from Connor Campbell, and that was, can Henri do a center relocation?
Well, it's pretty likely that it already has done a center relocation. Earlier, we had a SCAT pass that's, I think it's roughly 8 hours ago, where we have been seeing that the center may be a little bit asymmetric and has a southward extension towards the mid-level vortex. And currently, Recon shows that there appears to be the center, the low-level center, pretty far embedded into the convective mass that is associated with the mid-level vortex. So it's likely there already has been occurring a center relocation with Henri.
Let's see here. If Grace drops enough rain, could it cause mudslides? Well, the National Hurricane Center has highlighted quite easily that there is mudslides, a likely good likelihood of them. Here are the key messages for them, and as of right now, what we're going to be looking at are going to be hurricane conditions as well as dangerous storm surge that are likely along portions of the coast of eastern mainland Mexico. That starts this evening, so pretty much any time now. Of the coast of eastern mainland Mexico beginning this evening within the hurricane warning. Of course, as previously mentioned, the hurricane warning extends from Puerto Veracruz northward to Cabo Rojo. Through the weekend at least, heavy rainfall across Veracruz, Puebla, Tlaxcala, Hidalgo, northern Querétaro, as well as eastern San Luis Potosi will lead to significant flash and urban flooding, along with the likelihood of mudslides. And just to clarify real quick, if you have the chat being gone, all you have to do is refresh the tab. Sometimes it happens, so all you need to do is just refresh and things should be squared away back again. Another question we had is Henri going to hit Canada? If it is, it's probably going to be a post-tropical cyclone by then. The chances aren't exactly looking too favorable. The main area that needs to be concerned right now is northeastern United States. Anywhere from New Jersey all the way up to the northeast needs to be watching the system very, very closely, especially as this gets closer. What is your forecast peak for Grace? As of right now, we're going with 110. That is our current forecast on this system, 110 miles an hour. Will New York City be flooded by Henri?
Probably not, because New York City is at the western side of these. It's likely to be at the western side of the circulation, where wind goes from land to the sea and pushes water away from the coast. There's a much higher risk of storm surge flooding if you are to the east of the circulation where you have a lot of onshore flow, which is unlikely to be in New York.
Let's see here. Next question we had from the Great Random Channel now is asking, can Henri shift a little more?
Well, the entire time we have been observing the storm for the last few days, we always have been seeing this constant westward shift, and if you have such a robust pattern, it's pretty likely that we'll also continue to see some westward shifting. Um, yeah, especially the models that have been performing the best, especially the HWRF, which has relatively little track and intensity error so far. Those have been especially bullish on taking the storm very far towards the west, even in towards New York City, New Jersey area, and for example, the HWRF. I think it goes roughly to the western part of Long Island into New York City, and then stalls out the storm, and we have a naked vortex without convection going towards the east with a lower level flow afterwards.
Yep. Let's see here. Our next question that we have, because we have quite a few. Um, could Henri make landfall in New Jersey?
Perfect timing for me to join, and good evening, everybody.
Coming on stream with us is actually someone from New Jersey, Jonesy. How are you today?
Doing alright. Could have been here earlier, but I recently had to do a move, so this is my first time showing up this week. But for the question being on if New Jersey could get a landfall, not out of the realm of possibility. Parts of northeastern New Jersey are in the cone right now, from what I've seen. Parts of the northern end of the Jersey Shore, as well as northeastern New Jersey, that is just due west of New York City, are under tropical storm watches. So it's definitely possible that a New Jersey landfall can happen. The track has been going more and more westerly. I even did mention that this could pull somewhat like this could do like an Irene track where it just goes up and does a landfall in New York City. This could pull a Sandy track and do that left hook into New Jersey. So it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that New Jersey gets a landfall. The real question would be, if New Jersey does get a landfall, where would it be in New Jersey?
Well, the thing I think is that has been a trend over the last few days that we see this continued westward shift is that I think landfall in New Jersey might be a bit more likely than we'd like to think when we see the current NHC cone and also the ensembles, because the best performing models have been constantly on the western side, also in sometimes even into New Jersey. So there's definitely a lot of potential to for the state to get impacted even by hurricane force winds. And of course, if the storm is gonna make landfall further south, it's gonna first be closer to the upper level low and be slingshotted a bit faster into land, and also gonna spend less time over colder water, which means that the potential landfall intensity increases substantially.
Well, we are getting to the point of the year where sea surface temperatures are around its peak off the Jersey shoreline. As we get into September, that's usually when the air temperatures start to cool off and the water temperatures do continue to rise until the end of August, early September, and then they start to fall off. So we're around that time period where the sea surface temperatures are at their peak off the Jersey Shore. I haven't been taking a look at it, but around this time of year, they should be in the 70s. So, and if they're especially take the trend of the last few years where they would be in the upper 70s around this time of year. Usually, on average, they should be in the mid 70s or lower 70s. If they are in the upper 70s, then yeah, you could definitely be talking about more hurricane force stuff for New Jersey.
I don't
I
have
have
the
not.
CSAF.
I haven't. Yeah, I don't have that either. So
I
I'm not really
I
sure what it looks like.
I don't have the sea surface temperatures in Fahrenheit, but I have them in Celsius. And currently, it looks like the sea surface temperatures are roughly 22, 23 degrees Celsius at the Jersey Shore, which is um about 2 to 3 degrees above average, actually.
71
But
to
still,
73. That's about average for this time of year. And it mainly depends on where you are on the Jersey Shore. If you're talking about that's the
well, at the southern
temperature
end
up
of the
by
Jersey
Sandy Hook, that's the northernmost Jersey Shore beach.
At the southern end, the sea surface temperatures appear to be more 24 degrees Celsius. And I actually have the anomaly chart with me, and it looks like sea surface temperatures at the entire shore are about 2 degrees above average. I can also send this into the Discord.
I had a question that I want to get onto because it was asking how far away is Grace from landfall. While you guys were answering that, I actually did look into that, and as of right now, it's around 93 miles from landfall, and that is looking to be just north of the city of Nautla. So if that is the case, and the National Hurricane Center's landfall projections of it being at 10 miles an hour still, up until it does make contact, that would all mean about 9.25 hours until landfall. So as right now, that would pretty much put landfall. Let's see here. It's about to be 8 p.m. Central Time, so just add 9 hours to that, and that would be about 5 a.m. Central Time. 6 a.m. Eastern is probably the closest reasonable time. Of course, that's going to be adjusted by an hour or so, but depending on what happens. So that's not exactly the final landfall time, but at the current rate, that would be a 5 a.m. Central Time landfall. Let's see here. Another question that we had. Connor Campo, can Grace's eye reach positive temperature before landfall?
I mean, if it has 9 hours, that's certainly a possibility. Usually, when you have storms that rapidly intensify and have these big vertical hot towers circulating around, and when they get to a more what we call uniform lift, isentropic lift is the uh, smart term for that. That it begins that the eye usually turn comes out with ferocity very fast and clears out a lot. But if, of course, the eye temperature is directly bound to the intensity of the storm, and if it gets really close to land, there is the beginning land interaction, and it depends on how much it might be disrupted by land interaction to how much the eye is able to clear out until we get a landfall.
Let's see here. After looking through it, actually might be a little bit closer to landfall than I thought. I'll get back to that on that one. But with Grace, what preparations and precautions do you recommend to be taking in the city of Morelia? Let me see where that is in Mexico so I can give a more accurate and concrete answer, so that way I'm not telling you basic or anything like that. Give me a second as I see where it would be in relation to things. Morelia, that is way inland. By the point it gets to, time it gets to you, you are in the cone, well inside the cone. But it seems that at that point it'll probably be around 35 to 40 miles an hour, by the time it does get around Morelia, so prepare for gusty winds. Definitely going to be some rainfall. A few inches is definitely possible. But in terms of whether you need to go in the store or, buy a whole bunch of stuff, that doesn't really seem likely. I think you guys are fine. It's probably just going to be some gusty winds, potentially up to 35, 40 miles an hour. And the main threat's just going to be rainfall. So that is what we're looking at, and I think I finally got to through the brunt of those questions. So if you have any more, you can feel free to send them. Again, another reminder just to tag us at Force13. That will tag our name on orange, and that will provide us that information for us to go through. And just as we say that, another question pops in from Altan Ibran 98 Gaming. That was from asking is there any high pressure systems near Henri at the moment?
Well, there's this upper level ridge that Henri is currently moving under. And there is a ridge over Canada which is progressing eastward together with this upper level low is gonna steer it into the New England area. And when it's gonna be steered into the New England area, there's also gonna be a ridge to the east of the storm, which is also gonna steer it together with the ridge over Canada in towards New England. So by the time it gets into New England, there's a ridge to the north and a ridge to the east and an upper level low to the west. Both all of these steering influences are gonna steer it into the New England area.
So after looking further, it's kind of clear to see the landfall time frame now that the eye is speaking out. It looks like it's actually going to be about 7.5 hours if it maintains its current pace of 10 miles an hour. So that would actually take it around 3.5. So of course it's about to be 8 p.m. Central Time right now there. So that would take it to about 3:30 a.m. Central Time, 4:30 a.m. on the eastern coast. So, not exactly good that we're seeing yet another late night landfall. We saw that with the Yucatan Peninsula, although that was slightly later. But now we're just going to be seeing one that's in the middle of the night. So it's definitely going to be a very, very long night for Mexico. Impacts are going to be starting to begin very soon if they haven't already. We can already see the clouds of it have at least already started to affect there. So once we get further into night, conditions are really going to be deteriorating rapidly. And with the satellite loop, you can start to see that eye come in at the latest frames there. So we're definitely watching this unfold, and it's definitely showing that Grace is definitely still intensifying. Let's see here. Figuring out more questions as I see them. And this would be, will Grace have a pinhole eye at landfall? I know this was asked, but I don't think it's going to have a landfall. The eye it's showing right now is, even though it's not even fully out yet, it's already larger than a pinhole would be classified. So, that's a clear-cut no. Charles Folks asked, do you think it looks like a new hot tower is firing in the southeastern quadrant in the latest IR frame?
Yes. And also, I wanted to add the current eye size by Recon confirmed is 32 nautical miles. That's actually above average eye size.
And just to give an idea, because of course there are some people who are probably not familiar with the term of hot towers. What are hot towers?
Hot towers are basically just really tall thunderstorms that shoot up and release a lot of latent heat, and cause the minimum central pressure at the surface to fall down, which draws in more which draws in air into the tropical cyclone and keeps this what we call Carnot engine cycle. Some of in the Discord server call it like that. Keeps the cycle alive if of the tropical cyclone, air rising in the eye wall, and then sinking outside the tropical cyclone, going inside again and rising in the eye wall, and air sinking in the eye. And the hot tower, when you have the development of, for example, rotating hot towers, which we call vertical hot towers because they um, have a spin around the center, then it's a almost sure sign that rapid intensification is occurring because you release a lot of latent heat and you have quick pressure falls. And that has been happening with Grace. A pretty perfect example for um, how you have significant hot towers that are signs of a rapid intensification phase.
And I do want to remind everyone, of course, normally this would be the time where we wrap up and, get to the On This Day segment, but this is a special 2-hour edition of our live truck weather bulletins, given the significant impacts and threats we're seeing from both systems of Grace and Henri. So we will be here another hour, and we will be closing at the top of the next hour. So rather than us ending at our usual time of around 1 UTC, or over here where we use Eastern Time Zone, it would be 9 p.m. and that would typically end. It'll be Tuesday or 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central Time. So we will be able to stick around another hour and continue answering questions because, of course, there has been a massive load of them, and we do want to get as many questions answered as we potentially can. But recapping what is going on, just as people are, if in the event of people are entering, we are currently dealing with 2 significant storms that are set to impact land. We now have Hurricane Grace with winds of at least 100 miles an hour, which makes it a Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale. It is set to make landfall overnight as a Category 2, probably a high end at this point. And then, of course, there is also Tropical Storm Henri that is likely to become a hurricane soon enough. And there is, of course, hurricane warnings across the New England area. So that is another significant threat that we are watching here with that. Winds of 70 miles an hour currently, a pressure of 994 millibars from the National Hurricane Center, and it is expected that it intensifies. A 90 mile an hour peak is what they are calling for. Not out of the whole entire realm of possibilities that gets to Category 2 if conditions do warrant. Tomorrow is definitely going to be the key day that shows what this system will accomplish. So that is what we're looking at in terms of that. Of course, hurricane warnings are all across Mexico and, of course, New England. So anyone there needs to be making sure all preparations are completed. Mexico, you should have had these preparations complete by now. New England, you still have time. Tomorrow is your last day before conditions begin to deteriorate overnight Saturday and into Sunday. So that is what we're going to be looking at here. We will be here for another hour, so keep those questions coming, and we will be able to answer them. And, of course, we will go to the On This Day part and further on at the 55-minute mark of the next hour. But continuing on, because, of course, we still have quite a few questions to answer. And that was, what effects do you expect in Albany, New York from Henri?
Well, Albany's more inland. Albany is in the cone. I will say that. For that, it would be more inland stuff, being rainfall, which the Weather Prediction Center expects 2 to 4 inches out of it, and they are just on the border of a marginal and slight risk for flash flooding. On the day 3 outlook, wind speed probabilities, they're probably within the 30 to 40% for tropical storm force winds. So that's about what you're going to see for Albany.
We had a question that was asking if we could pull up the IR on Grace zoomed in rather than the current satellite imagery that we have.
If you have pulled up this IR satellite, it would be worth noting that there's this really significant band of intense cloud tops wrapping around the eye, which is a sign that the storm is still intensifying, and also the eye has been beginning to clear out and has now spots that are all the way down to negative 62 degrees roughly. Um, yeah.
Yeah, definitely an interesting sight we're seeing with this. It was definitely always a possibility that we'll be seeing it come out, and of course we're now watching that occur. And it's definitely likely that as long as this remains out in the waters, it is going to continue to intensify. National Hurricane Center already clarified this will be intensifying up to landfall. So of course we still got another 7 hours before this, or at least 7 hours before this makes landfall at the current pace. So that it gives it 7 more hours to intensify even further as to what it's got already, and it's looking really healthy at the moment. So not really good news at all for the coast of Mexico, especially Notla, which is likely going to be seeing the worst impacts from this, as that is north of the landfall zone, and we know that the worst impacts always occur in the eye wall in the northeastern quadrant, is where we usually see those strongest winds. So not good news at all with that. And as of right now, we're looking at a few more questions as to what we're seeing with Grace there. And that was another one that was asking, when would the first impacts, gusty winds and rain, be felt in the city of Morelia? That's probably going to be holding off until tomorrow for you. So at some point tomorrow, things should likely get worse, as well, as especially as you get into the afternoon and overnight hours. That'll likely be the worst of the rainfall and gusty winds. And we had another question that we had reiterating about New Jersey and their impacts. What impacts could New Jersey see in any kind of scenario from this?
Yeah, I saw a couple of New Jersey questions. Could Henri hit New Jersey badly? Do you think the impacts of Henri could be similar to Sandy? Just a good amount of New Jersey questions. Is Henri going to pull a Sandy? No. I will tell you right now, Henri's not going to pull a Sandy. For Henri to pull a Sandy, it would literally have to dump about 2 to 3 feet of snow in West Virginia and the Appalachians of Virginia and North Carolina and all that. That happened at the end of October. This is August. I highly doubt you're going to see a 2-foot blizzard in the end of August.
That and this isn't going to be exploding into a 1,000 mile wide storm.
Yeah, it's not going to blow up to 1,000 miles wide. It's not going to dip into the 900 teens. So for pressure. So Henri's not going to pull a Sandy. Damage-wise, though, as we've learned over the years, New Jersey's not really the best when it comes to dealing with hurricanes. As we know, Irene and Sandy did a lot of damage. There are some people that said Isaias moving up last year actually did more damage to them than Sandy and Irene did combined. So it depends on how Henri affects New Jersey, where it comes, if it goes onshore on Long Island, on New York City, if it's going to come on to New Jersey or not. And it will also depend on what impacts. Right now, I'm only seeing 1 to 2 inches of rain max. There is going to be a storm surge. There is going to be tropical storm force winds. Those are more going to be towards eastern New Jersey. That's where the higher probabilities are. As you go more west, it comes down. Currently, me up here in northwest New Jersey, I'm under about a 40 to 50% chance of tropical storm force winds. So for Henri, if it would pull, could it badly affect New Jersey? That would be more on if it makes a direct landfall on New Jersey, and if it makes it more down towards seaside Atlantic City, Cape May landfall in New Jersey, then you'd be talking about pretty much what Sandy and Irene did, and you would get more of a push of water into New York and northeastern New Jersey and Long Island, which for surge, that would be the worst case scenario, and you're also would be talking about more rain and wind possibly as well for more areas in New Jersey. Damage-wise, Could it be as bad as Sandy? It depends on where you are. If you had no damages from Sandy and you get damages from Henri, then yeah, it would be worse than Sandy. But if you literally lost everything in Sandy, I don't think you're going to lose everything again from Henri. I'm going to tell you that straight up. It really depends on what Henri decides to do, how it gets its influence from high pressures and the jet stream and the Gulf Stream, and also where does the track go from here. And as I was talking about rain, they're only saying 1 to 2. Well, if it keeps moving more west, you're going to be talking about more of the rain coming in. The remnants of Fred literally just moved through here a couple days ago, and the ground is already saturated. We had a little bit of rain also today earlier, so the ground is already saturated. And I'm even forgetting about the tornado threat, because there's always a tornado threat from tropical cyclones. There was actually a tornado that was spawned from the remnants of Fred over in Rockaway, which is in Morris County in New Jersey, more going towards the western part of the state. From where I am, that's about 20-30 minutes away. So there is still many possibilities on what Henri could do damage-wise to New Jersey. Is it going to be as bad as Sandy? No. As I said, if you got no damages from Sandy and you end up getting a lot of damages from Henri, then for you personally, then it would be worse than Sandy. But overall, generally, I don't think we're going to get a repeat of Sandy. I don't think so. No, I'm going to say that for a fact.
And even then, as of right now, the projected landfall does not take it into New Jersey directly, so of course the worst of the impacts are going to be northeast of the center, and that would basically mean that Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, you're likely going to be the ones that are going to be under the gun the fullest of this system. So I would really be mainly concerned about them and the impacts that they would be seeing. But New Jersey is definitely a state that should definitely be watching regardless of which scenario plays out. Let's see here. Moving on to the next question, since of course we still have one. Hypothetical question. This is from someone, and now they're asking, what do you think would happen if Grace was on water for another day or two?
Well, because of the sea surface temperatures being abnormally above average across the entire basin of the Gulf of Mexico, I would definitely say Grace could be a major, and possibly a high-end major too. I don't think it would get to 5, but I think you talk about another day or two over water, you're talking about possible high-end 3 to a mid-range 4 going into Mexico if this spent another day or two over the Walker. Excuse me, not the Walker, the water.
I think if it would spend another 24 to 38 hours over water, there's pretty much it would pretty much certainly be a 405 with the sea surface temperatures and how it already looks like. The environment is favorable enough. It's just that it's gonna do landfall so early. That is the main inhibiting factor for the intensity that it reaches.
Yeah, ironically, the relative humidity actually increases while it's inland, so if that were to be replaced with water, and, for example, the distance to Mexico was increased and all, then yeah, we would have been looking at a much stronger storm, but there really is no good, thankfully, to this. The only reason this isn't going to get as strong as it could is because of Mexico and the fact that it's going to be on a collision course with it, so there really is no good news with it. The thing that's stopping Grace from reaching its fullest potential is literally Mexico itself, so that is what we're going to be looking at for here in the next 2 hours. It's still got some time if it wants to go out up to high-end 2, maybe low-end 3. We're not forecasting that right now, but of course that could easily change depending on what happens. We'll see what happens with that. I doubt this could bring tropical storm force winds in Philly, but could Henri bring some rain to that city?
I'm looking at the Weather Prediction Center's graphic right now. North side and east side of Philly, literally nothing. It's on the color scale, it's white, which means it would be nothing to 1. Western and southern side of Philly, it says 1 to 2 inches, so it depends on what part of Philly you're in. That is what the Weather Prediction Center is saying for right now. So overall in Philly, though, regardless where you are, you could see some rain. But it depends on what part of Philly you're in. What we're talking about inch-wise when it comes to rain or not. The heaviest rain looks to be to the overall anywhere to be to the southeast of Hartford, and then again to the north and west of Hartford, going up through Springfield and in going very close to Vermont. And I do see a little dot of orange in southern Vermont, and that's 6 to 10 inches of rain, where the moderate risk of excessive rainfall is currently in effect for day 3, which is Sunday.
And yeah, it could easily escalate. We're not exactly commonly seeing day 3s go to moderate, so that just gives an idea of how significant of a situation we could be looking at here. So we'll see whether a high risk gets introduced for that. It is very much in the cards, but as of right now, we're looking at that. There was a question about whether Hurricane Henri will spawn tornadoes. Actually, compared to most tropical cyclones, there's actually less of a chance than normal. Between the fact that the Storm Prediction Center is issuing no severe risk for this at the moment, and the fact that tropical weather statements that have been issued across portions of New England in association with the hurricane and tropical storm warnings have not shown anything about tornado threats with this. Tropical storm force winds, obviously, but tornado threat, that looks rather low. So, while an isolated 1 or 2 is definitely possible, compared to what we've been seeing with many of the other landfalling U.S. tropical cyclones this year, that does not look that much possible. Another question. Okay, that was a funny question, but I can't answer that. If there are storms with tire, what would names be? Well, obviously we can't know that for sure because of the fact that it's, not even the end of the season yet. Another question, is there... We already answered this. Can Grace start weakening or go through an eyewall replacement cycle?
Well, currently there is no apparent concentric eyewall, so it's very unlikely that it establishes one in the short time it still has until landfall. So, no, eyewall replacement cycle is highly improbable at the current time. And also until landfall.
Yeah, of course, this only has about 7 hours left until it does come on a collision course with land, so that's extremely short time for it to be starting an eyewall replacement cycle anyhow. Next question we had was, what are the chances of Henri becoming a Category 2?
I think I saw they want a 75 knot peak out of Henri, which I believe is 80 or 85 miles an hour off the top of my head.
85.
So it would have to get Cat 2. It would have to go to 95, or actually 100. My fault. Not. It's one of those two.
It's 100 miles an hour, 85 knots.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it taps into the Gulf Stream well and the shear just basically becomes near nothing, I'd say there's the chance. I don't think Henri is going to become a Category 2, though.
Oh, I think it's very possible that it manages to strengthen all the way to Category 2. I mean, 15 knot intensity error is actually pretty relatively small. Also, the environment there, as I said, there's this small window where there's very favorable conditions, and Henri has the chance to even rapidly intensify. That's Henri's chance to become a Category 2 hurricane. Before it goes into the colder waters and then makes landfall in the northeast.
We now have another question, but what do we think are the chances of Grace becoming a major before it makes landfall?
They aren't very bad. I mean, it still has about 7 hours until landfall, and so far we have seen a rapid intensification phase. And also, you can see on satellite imagery, you have this big band coming from the southwest, wrapping around the eye. That's a sign of continued intensification. So there's definitely the chance is very real that it manages to intensify all the way to major hurricane status. Yeah.
Yeah, personally I give it a 30-70 right now, just based off of the close proximity. So that just means it can't be ruled out, but like I've been saying, 110 is definitely not out of the realm of possibility with this. Thoughts on 965 millibars being found in Grace? I guess that would give us a good question about what has Recon been finding, as of course the final flight is in Grace right now.
I have not been seeing 965 millibars. I have there has been a extrapolated pressure of around 966 millibars, but the drop zone, um, which which may have been not entirely within the pressure center of the storm, found a pressure of roughly 969 millibars at the current pass, which is actually 2 millibars higher than the last pass. But the difference in pressure is relatively small, and also the last pressure measurement we got may have been associated with a mesovortex, or the drop zone hasn't been. The current drop zone may have but may hasn't been dropped in the actual center, in the actual exact center of the storm. Um, so so far, the both of the recon passes don't show a lot of strengthening. The only thing that I've been noticing is that the temperature spike in the eye has been increasing in size.
Let's see here. Next question we have was, what are the oh, we already answered that one. What was the last storm to strike Connecticut? I don't think much of us know off the top of our heads what that last storm was. Hold on. I will try to figure that out. In the meantime, I will answer other questions, but I will get an answer to you on that one. We already answered that. Can Henri downgrade? Wait. Can Henri downgrade? I guess you're asking, can Henri weaken before it makes landfall? That is expected to happen, actually. It is expected to make landfall at 75 miles an hour, contrary to the 85 mile an hour peak that is currently forecast with it. So that is pretty much what we're saying. Satellite Loops ask, when is landfall expected? I'm assuming that is for Grace, and we are currently expecting landfall around 3 to 4 a.m. Central Time. That is currently what we are seeing, based on the recent trends and where the center is currently. It is about 70 miles away from the coast north of Nautla. That is what we're looking at for landfall at this time.
I'm not sure which one it is that directly hit Connecticut. I know effect-wise, the last storms to affect the state of Connecticut were literally ones that we've had this year in both Elsa and Fred. Fred being remnants, and then Elsa being still tropical. But it made landfall in Rhode Island, so just east of Connecticut, but they still got some impacts from that. Directly to strike Connecticut, probably Bob of 91, but I'm not sure. I see someone in the chat, when is the last hurricane strike in New York City? Irene 2011 made landfall in New Jersey, not New Jersey, New York City, but it was downgraded to 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm when it made landfall in New York City. As for hurricane, though, I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I did get a landfall on the Connecticut question. The answer is the last storm that hit Connecticut as a tropical storm was Hannah of 2008.
Really?
Yep. There's only been 3 New England landfalls in the New England area. That was Hermine in 2004, which made landfall in Massachusetts. That was Beryl in 2006, which made landfall near Nantucket. And then, of course, Hannah of 2008, that made a tropical storm landfall there as well. So that is what we've seen with that one. But the last hurricane to make landfall in New England was Bob of 1991. That we have not seen a hurricane landfall since then, so quite a significant event we're seeing with that one. Looking at more questions that we have, and that is, what's the last? Oh, we already. John Zero took care of that one. Is there new tropical storms in the Atlantic? Well, there are 2 systems active. Of course, we have Category 2 Grace and Tropical Storm Henri. There is another area of investigation that is located in the main development region, expected to keep in a motion northwestwards. However, development will be slow if it does occur, and it shouldn't really be too strong of a system, considering the fact that it's going to be dealing with some dry air. Only a 20% chance of formation. The next name at the moment is now Ida. And another question from Alexia Taylor. Does Grace remind you of Katya 2017?
No. Because Grace has been a tropical cyclone east of the Lesser Antilles, and Katya formed from a disturbance that actually started in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico and has been moving its entire life very slowly. And Katya also has been a tiny hurricane, while Grace is relatively big in terms of size.
Let's see here. What is Grace's rate of deepening at the moment?
So
I've heard a couple millibars an hour for the past few hours.
Especially for the last 2 recon passes, we actually didn't observe any deepening again. But it's likely that we'll still see some continued intensification with the storm, especially as the recon passes have shown that the dew point in the eye is decreasing, so it means that we have more dry air coming into the eye, and also that the temperature spike in the mid-levels, which shows the strength of the warm core, which is needed for a tropical system, is increasing. So both these things should eventually lead to more pressure falls.
Alright, let's see
Alright,
here. Oh,
so I found out the answer. The last tropical storm to make landfall, as I said, was Irene of 2011. It actually made landfall. Post-analysis, they downgraded to 65 miles an hour on Coney Island. The last hurricane, and the only hurricane ever to make landfall on New York City, was the 1821 Norfolk and Long Island hurricane.
only been 200 years.
But wasn't there actually a New York hurricane in 1893? Or am I completely out?
It did not make landfall in New York City.
Okay. But if I remember correctly, there was a hurricane that is called New York Hurricane.
Not
And
in
if I remember
1893.
correctly, not in 1893?
No.
Okay, but 1983 was a fairly active hurricane season. very active actually. One of the most active there has ever been observed. I think the third most active in terms of accumulated cyclone energy.
Let's see here. Moving back on to 2021 things, of course. Do you think the rest of the season will be very active?
Yeah, relatively active. It fits about the 18 to 19 storms predictions we have seen so far. What the activity is, especially when we have this Kelvin wave over the Pacific moving into the Atlantic in September. That's when I think we're gonna have a second spike in activity. Because of the rising air over the Atlantic, meaning increased convection, increased thunderstorms. Increased thunderstorms and convection means tropical cyclones are more likely to form. Yeah.
Okay, so I actually was incorrect. You were right. There was an 1893 hurricane. It was Category 1. For some reason, it wasn't coming up on the list that I was looking at. But yeah, there was an 1893 New York hurricane that it peaked as a Cat 3, but it made landfall as a Cat 1 in New York City. This was the third ever one to make a direct landfall in New York City. The second was the one that I said, 1821, Norfolk and Long Island hurricane, Irene in 2011, and then a pre-Christopher Columbus era. There was a hurricane between the years of 1278 and 1438 that made landfall on what is known today as New York City.
Okay.
Moving on. What was the last hurricane to hit New England as a major? I still have that pulled up, so I should be able to pull that up. And at the moment, give me a second as I figure that out, because there's definitely not many. The last Category 3 was the New England hurricane of 1938. Oh, wait, never mind. It was actually Carol of 1954. That was the last Category 3 to make landfall in New England. Carol of 54.
Okay, so good note to make about 1821 that I didn't mention. 1893 was the last hurricane to make landfall in New York City. 1821 was the only major hurricane to make landfall in New York City. 1821.
Alright, returning back to 2021 questions, hopefully.
Yes.
Do you have any good Mexican cameras with swaying light poles and such? I don't think we're going to have that. The person that typically helps provide us isn't here right now. I'm sure that's going to be definitely more prominent with the landfall coverage, but there's not exactly that many cameras as there are in the Yucatan Peninsula, so that's probably not going to be the case with that one. Could the Pacific be more active than Atlantic this season in terms of named storms? Of course, I was just saying basically I was just basically saying like a basic thing and then you can explain. But as of right now, of course, the next name now in the Eastern Pacific is Marty. And they have the chance of seeing 2 more storms, and they've already finished half their list now. I think this would be the 14th and 15th storms that they formed there, or somewhere around that region. And then, of course, the Atlantic is up to currently 8, so the Eastern Pacific is currently outpacing, but keep in mind that the peaks are kind of different for the Eastern Pacific compared to the Atlantic overall.
Yeah, and also they're La Nina seasons, or at least these kind of second La Nina seasons also, they tend to be very, the activity tends to be concentrated very much into the first half of the season, and the second half of the season is usually a lot more inactive and below average. And I'm with the current prospect of getting 18 to 19 named storms in the Atlantic, which we are actually pretty much on pace on. We're currently, I think, the third. I don't know if it's now still the case, but a few days ago, we have been the third most active year in terms of named storms activity or named storms formation dates. And usually in September and October are pretty active months in the Atlantic and less active in the Eastern Pacific, especially as I said in La Nina seasons. So if we actually get 18 to 19 named storms in the Atlantic, it's pretty likely that the Atlantic will, although it doesn't seem likely if you look at the naming lists right now. But I think it's pretty likely that the Atlantic will eventually outpass the Eastern Pacific in terms of both named storms and accumulated cyclone energy.
I saw a question in the chat. Someone asked, "Did the Long Island Express hurricane, aka the New England hurricane in 1938, make landfall in New York City?" No, it made landfall on Suffolk County, which is out on Long Island. That's actually the easternmost on Long Island to do so.
Let's see here, going back to the questions. I'm trying to stay in present time here, of course, given the threats we're seeing with this. Let's see here. We had another question with asking, why is the northeastern eye wall look to be weakening or collapsing?
That's probably for Grace.
I'm assuming that's for Grace.
Yeah, that comes from the outer subsidence of the burst of the current convective burst that is currently wrapping around. In front of these wrapping around convective bursts, you have an area of subsidence, which makes itself shown in terms of warming cloud tops. So before the convective burst wraps in, you have an area of warming cloud tops.
Let's see here. I'm gonna assume this isn't serious because the person that's asked that question said the storm looks terrible. It just lost all convection when it is far from the case. It's literally forming an eye right now, and it kind of needs a lot of convection to do that. Given the fact that there's quite a bit of minus 80 to 90 cloud tops with this thing, it's safe to say that this definitely has not lost convection much. In terms of the grand scheme of things, this thing has not lost all of its convection at all. Can there be a Cat 5 over 200 miles an hour in the Atlantic? That comes from Crazy Zach YT.
By what?
One day there will be. This year, no.
I mean, it can happen every year, even in a super El Nino type year. Well, yeah, there can of course be a 200-mile-an-hour plus hurricane in the Atlantic if it's possible in the Eastern Pacific in October. It's certainly also possible in the Western Caribbean, especially as the Western Caribbean is actually an area with, on average, more ocean heat content than the Eastern Pacific. The Western Caribbean actually has the most ocean heat content out of the entire Western Hemisphere. So if one day a 200-mile-an-hour plus hurricane occurs in the Atlantic, it's almost certainly going to be in the Western Caribbean.
Let's see here. Moving on.
Or I would say it would be, what I'd say somewhere in the Caribbean, or probably right to the east of Florida and around the Bahama areas. I think that would be where our 200-mile-an-hour storm would be.
I mean, MPI around the Bahamas is usually around 155 to 160 knots, so I don't really know how you would end up with 175 knots there. It's probably pretty much restricted to the Eastern Caribbean. All storms that have been going 155 or 160 knots in the open Atlantic outside the Western Caribbean have all been pretty close to their to their actual MPI, which means maximum potential intensity. Yeah.
Let's see here. We still got 20 minutes left before we do start wrapping up for the night, so if you have any, or we will, at least for this specific stream, because of course there's going to be landfall coverage probably coming some point overnight. But as with the more questions that we have, it was, is there still a risk for Texas and Louisiana states that do not need a hurricane after the 2020 season in the February freeze in the next 2 weeks? So I guess they're asking if a hurricane's going to hit Texas or Louisiana in the next 2 weeks.
It's too far out to make to answer this question. We don't know if there's gonna be a hurricane 14 days out, but if you're talking about the near future, about 5 to 7 days, there's not a hurricane threat for both Texas and for Louisiana.
I know the GFS has been really consistent about trying to produce something towards the end of the model forecast period, but it seems that they've actually been trending weaker in the last few ones. Because I know they used to produce a 950 millibar something storm in the Caribbean, but it seems that, oh, never mind, they still have it going major. But I don't think it's gonna happen, given the fact, at least not. There's very little certainty as to whether that would actually happen at the moment, considering the fact that it is so far out. I mean, we're talking about something that wouldn't be going on until early September, and the fact that we still got another 11 days left of August, or 10 days UTC time. So, even then, that is extremely far out, and it just cannot be predicted any more times.
I did see a question.
I'm
Someone
the
asked-
one who I was getting there.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Anyways, I'm going in order, and that we already answered the question about how much is Grace expected to intensify. That is up to 110. And then another question about, okay, so another one we had, what storm is memorable for you so far in this season? Well, there hasn't exactly been that many. I think a biggest one that probably comes to mind is Claudette, obviously, considering the fact that it formed over land twice, and both times near a Walmart, and I guess that's become a meme to many in terms of the grand scheme of things. Elsa was definitely interesting, considering the fact it became the fastest moving storm to rapidly intensify on record.
It was also a pain to track.
Yeah. Elsa was extremely challenging to track, period. And then, of course, Grace is definitely living up. Henri is definitely living up. Not only is Henri a track we've never seen before, just because the fact that, as I've said multiple times now, probably getting redundant at this point, no storm that formed northeast of Bermuda has ever hit the U.S., so there's been quite a few notable ones so far this year.
Yeah, as soon as I saw 96L pop up, I'm like, what is this, and why does it have high chance of formation? And then Henri formed, and then I saw it was making a track to go up towards the U.S. I'm like, what? And now we're talking about possible hurricane landfall from Henri. So this year has been the year of the weird storms, honestly. From Claudette, I'd say from Anna and Bill and Claudette, and then Danny as well. Elsa, obviously. Fred was the only non-weird storm, in my opinion, in this year of weird storm. Same with Grace. Henri has definitely gone like the first 5 storms of the season of being, weird tracks and weird storms.
I guess Fred could get some points for, having 2 lives, but, moving on to the next question on the list here. If Henri makes landfall in Greenland, immediately skipping this question because it's not. Could there be possible flooding around the Binghamton area in upstate New York from Henri in 2011's Irene saturated the ground and the remnants of Lee caused catastrophic flooding?
That's actually the question I was going to answer before you cut me off earlier, but Right now, the Weather Prediction Center graphic does 1 to 2 inch range. Matter of fact, it actually has you in no rain from Henri. I know Devin, who's our chief cyclone analyst, has said in calls before with us how he said that the remnants of Lee really did a lot of catastrophic flooding, more in northern Pennsylvania and the more inland upstate parts of, New York State that did not receive the catastrophic flooding from Irene. Irene just saturated the ground over there, and then the remnants of Lee did the job. So, 2011 was definitely a bad year over here in the Northeast, and then obviously Sandy the next year. But if you're in the Binghamton area, you're out of the woods for this one. I'd say I think you're safe. The only thing that is there, though, is I think it looks like you're in either the 10-20% or 20 to 30% for tropical storm force winds. Otherwise, you're not really going to see some rain. And as I said, you're 20 to 30% or less on tropical storm force winds. So I think you're out of the woods on this one from Henri.
Continuing down the list of questions, are there any storms headed for Georgia? No. That's just gonna be that. When do you think Ida will form? Well, if it doesn't form from this AOI, probably towards the last week of August. Let's see here. I don't know why YouTube likes to just constantly go down there. I see. No, I think that was not the question. I'm gonna look. What are the odds of a hurricane undergoing faster intensification than Wilma in the next 5 or so years? Relatively low. I know Delta got close to that last year, but then that got kind of sheared, and the inability for it to get itself a nine didn't exactly help either. We all know that Wilma was a once in a lifetime hurricane in the Caribbean there, considering the fact it did explode to 80 something millibars there. It's the lowest pressure recorded in the Atlantic on records. So I don't know if that has any chance of happening. It all depends on what we see. It's extremely hard to predict anything that's next year, but if you're predicting for the next decade, then that becomes very, very problematic in terms of if we don't know anything. So we don't know about that. How much damage Grace will do if it makes landfall on Veracruz? The last I checked, it's not making landfall on Veracruz. This isn't moving directly south. It would have to move directly south in order to make landfall in Veracruz. So I will not have an answer just because it's literally not making landfall on Veracruz. Can hurricanes intensify at night? Well, just because it's a different time of day doesn't mean it can't intensify. These things intensify based off their water source and the environmental conditions around it, not based off of the daylight. The sun does not influence whether a storm is going to intensify or not. So I'm not exactly sure why that was given, but yeah, no, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. It can still intensify depending on the environmental conditions. I don't know what is with you guys in Greenland landfalls. Will there be a storm to make landfall in Greenland before 2050?
If a tropical... Quote me on this. If any storm somehow were to make a tropical landfall in Greenland by 2050, and I'm going to put this message in the Discord server, pin it, react to it, I will literally give everyone that reacts to that message $5. And if that's also if Discord's still a thing by 2050, there is no way, because the waters up there are extremely cold. There is no way that by 2050 could a tropical storm make landfall in Greenland, unless global warming and sea surface temperatures, ocean warming go burr in the next 30 years and cause that to happen, and that makes me eat my words. I'm going to guarantee to you by 2050 there will not be a tropical storm making landfall as a tropical storm in Greenland. I'm going to take it one step further and say that's probably never going to happen.
Yeah, needless to say, given the fact that it's hard enough to get storms not extratropical by 45 degrees north, we're talking about a landfall at 60 degrees north, so that just becomes a lot more out of the question there.
Which is why I'm willing to put money on the line there.
And even if that were to go, if we want to go way into the future here, we've got climate change. Obviously, the sea surface temperatures are probably going to rise still. And then, of course, ice sheets are going to melt and probably Greenland with it as well. So, if we wanted to think about the real aspect of things, I don't think Greenland's going to last long enough for landfall to actually happen there. Moving on to the next question here. What is your forecast for winds for Henri? We're going with 90 miles an hour for our forecast right now. We had a question about whether hurricanes were worse than tornadoes. Arguably, yes, because hurricanes can legit produce tornadoes. I mean, it's literally the interesting traits about hurricanes. It can legit produce tornadoes, especially across the U.S. landfalls.
And also, anticyclonic tornadoes are very rare. They usually don't happen, but they're actually more likely in hurricanes than they are being from normal tornadoes. So yeah, so hurricanes are definitely worse than tornadoes.
If you're talking about like an EF5 tornado, then yeah, the EF5 tornado is probably going to be worse, considering the fact that you typically don't see tornadoes that strong when it comes to hurricanes, but you can definitely get tornado outbreaks out of them, and they have definitely happened before on countless occasions. Let's see here. Going to the next question, it was, why did, no. Oh, crap, I just lost where I was. That's nice. Give me a second. I am ready to record Hurricane Henri when it makes landfall and go to the basement. Well, I'm going to tell you this, considering the fact that there is a flood threat with us. If there is storm surge that affects you, or flooding that affects you, you need to be making sure that you do go to higher ground. That is something that we always say with any kind of flash flooding or flooding. So how about a subtropical cyclone strikes Greenland? No. Wasn't Hurricane Faith in Hurricane near Norway? It was extratropical more than likely by that point.
We literally, all of our cyclone analysts are in agreement of that it was extratropical. And you'll see it in reanalysis. They're going to say that it was extratropical if they haven't already came out and said that it was extratropical.
Let's see here, moving on to our next question here. If Grace reforms, how strong is it expected to get? Well, of course, we do have an 80% chance of reforming. It'll likely be under a new name, though.
So the National
Oh boy,
you can finish before I continue. Sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah, as I was trying to say, the models really don't have too much of a strong system coming off from the remnants of Grace, and that's typically what we see from storms that cross over, especially in this kind of fashion. Basically, it's likely that it does become a relatively short-lived system, maybe lasted 2 or 3 days, but it's probably going to be weak. The system that's the 040 AOI we're looking at right now probably has a better shot at being stronger than that. So we'll be monitoring it, but I don't think it's going to be something that lasts too long, to be honest.
Yeah, and the National Hurricane Center, well, they don't even have the 040 marked yet, but I think they will soon. They have Grace currently at 50% chance of reforming in the next 48 hours, so because they expect it to move inland later tonight, and they expect it to dissipate over the mountains of Mexico by early Sunday. So that would show your 48-hour period. Formation chance through 5 days is 80%, so they're going 50-80. I remember that I saw it was at 1080 last night, and I was actually a little surprised that they had that reforming over once it gets to the Eastern Pacific, but that is looking likely. The models are picking up on it, but I don't think you're going to see it, be as strong as some of the other Eastern Pacific storms that we've seen this year, as in Felicia and Linda. I think you're only gonna you'll get some kind of tropical storm out of it. It's probably gonna be weak. I think its peak would be a mid-range tropical storm. I don't see the remnants of Grace doing much once it gets the east back, and of course it would be under a new name, and that would be Marty, I believe, which is next in the Eastern Pacific.
Well, that's if the new AOI doesn't develop faster. Otherwise, it
Yeah.
would be the next two names just to get it out of the way, just in case one receives the other, or Marty and Nora.
Yeah, so Marty would be the next one. I don't think this would continue as Grace. It would have to not dissipate to continue as Grace. There is a chance that for some reason the NHC could keep it as Grace in the Eastern Pacific. There's also a chance that they could go Grace Marty for
They won't.
reasons, but I don't think they will. It's more likely that it's going to dissipate over the mountains of Mexico, and it's going to get a new name, whether that be Marty or Nora. Right now, as I said, they don't even have the 040 AOI marked. They only have Grace marked as a 5080.
Alright, let's see here. Gonna be wrapping up questions soon, and, what are the chances of a typhoon hitting... Oh, what is with these questions? Come on, guys. Come on. I'm just not gonna answer that. That's all I'm gonna say, but in the meantime, there is a new update on Henri that was made by Christian, of course. I did say that he was not here tonight, as he was working on that, so of course you can find it there, on our main channel there. But I think it's safe to say, that's not gonna be the case. But yes, a new video update on Henri is out. You can find it on our main channel. Just click on our channel icon where it has the blue spinny icon logo, and you can find it there. Let's see here. A whole bunch of hypothetical questions. I'm trying to answer questions that we have in the next 4 minutes as to the current active systems and not future storms making landfall in random places. Please be realistic, guys, especially with how significant these threats are. We have 2 hurricane landfalls expected in the next few days here. And there we go. Scorpion Roblox asks, is Grace forming an eye? There is one clear-cut answer to that, and that is yes. An eye is trying to make itself established on Grace right now. That trend's been going on for over an hour by now. I think... Oh, it's actually getting itself more defined. I think the last that they checked, they said it was 30 or something like that. 30 or 35, somewhere in between there. Miles in diameter, which would actually put it in the above average size for eyes, so definitely not a pinhole if anyone was about to ask if this was a pinhole, like someone did earlier, but this is far from that. It's actually an above average size eye that's forming right now. Doing a pretty good job. It's definitely indicative of a strengthening storm. Will Hone form for the next 6 months? Probably not. You'll see what Hone joke we have today in about 6 minutes. And then, of course, will you be initiating the when will you be initiating the landfall coverage on Grace? Well, I'm trying to figure that out right now because, of course, we know this is going to be making landfall at about 3 a.m. Central Time. Hopefully Nathan is awake by then, because normally he would be the one who hosted that time zone. If not, I would probably have to step in because even though it's probably going to be like 4 a.m. by then, there will be landfall coverage on this no matter what. So hopefully Nathan should be back in time for the landfall on that one.
Well, I mean, you were on the 4 a.m. stream when it was making landfall in the Yucatan the other day, Xavier. So
yes, I kind of basically screwed up my sleep schedule for this storm. So I mean, I'm trying here. I knew I had a feeling that this would be making landfall earlier because it used to be planning on making landfall in the next few hours. It was supposed to be making landfall at like midnight or 1 a.m. Central Time. I'm like, okay, this works. And now it's like 3 a.m. Central Time. I'm like, okay, that's 4:30. It's like that's 4:30 that we're looking at in terms of my time for a landfall. So I'm not exactly sure I'll be up for that one, especially considering the fact
that you had of fixing your sleep schedule is just now gone.
Well, to be fair, I actually had nothing to really be, looking out for in terms of events. I kind of have to with tomorrow, so I can't exactly, stay up that late for a live coverage. So hopefully Nathan should be back by then. In terms of Henri, do you recommend I evacuate inland into Long Island, or should I evacuate west into... Well, if you're in Long Island, get out. If you are next to the coast.
island.
And joining us is Christian in the last 5
Hi,
minutes of the
Christian.
stream.
Yes, I mainly just joined to say that I have just published an update video on Henri. So I don't check it out now. The information should still be fairly up to date by the time the stream finishes. Bonus points if you notice the pun in the title.
Oh boy.
I'm also gonna answer that question. It depends on if you're saying inland in Long Island, so that would be going towards the center of Long Island. I'm not sure how far inland the water would get pushed, and if it's also the more center part of the island, which is inland from both Long Island Sound and the Atlantic, if that's a little more of a higher elevation than the coast, I'd say yeah. Right now, there's parts of Long Island is 2 to 4 feet, others is 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. And the other thing is, we're also talking about a full moon, and that usually helps with surge totals and water totals and all that. Not sure when the tide is going to be, but Sunday morning, 8 a.m. I know it's not supposed to come in until later in the afternoon or evening, but 8 a.m. on Sunday is full moon. So that is definitely gonna, up the surge totals a little bit. Oh my god, I'm having trouble pronouncing some words tonight. Excuse me. But if it's the same elevation throughout the entirety of the island, whether you're, away from the coast or not, I'd say probably better going into the city or New Jersey. But if the more center part of the island is a little more of a higher elevation than the coastal parts of it, and the water's not going to go that far inland, I'd say you might be safe being on that part of Long Island, but it probably would be better off to go into Jersey or New York City.
And of course, we'll be answering the last question. This was about our reanalysis on Hurricane Felicia. We did downgrade that to a Category 4 with winds of 155 miles an hour. But finishing off the team for today, we did have the following. We had Dakota, we had Sam, Jonesy, and of course Christian joining in for the last 2 minutes to promote the video that he made, and the fact that it had a pun.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that, even though I technically already advertised it before because someone noticed it in the chat. So yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we're not gonna have the blooper that we had last night, where we had the on this day showed up extremely zoomed in. But let's just get to it regardless. On this day in 1998, we had 3 systems active. We had tropical storms Bonnie and Charlie. Charlie, of course, would become much more cursed 6 years later. Bonnie would become a major hurricane and affect North Carolina and Virginia. Howard was a hurricane that would be long-lived and peak as a high-end Category 4. That image there shows Bonnie at its peak east of the Bahamas. Of course, on this day, products are powered by Cyclone History. You can find their tag on the bottom of your screen. Amazing how there was actually nothing in the Western Pacific or the North Indian Ocean, so 2 reasons only seeing activity at this point, and the strongest storm was a Cat 1. Well, here we are. The next name in the Atlantic is Ida, followed by Julian. In the Eastern Pacific, the next name is Marty, followed by Nora. And in the Central Pacific, it may be my birthday, but my birthday wish for getting Hone finally is still not coming true. God dang it. Moving on over to the Western Pacific, the next name is now Kansan, followed by Chantu. In the North Indian Ocean, we're still looking out for Gulam and Shaheen, 2 names we're probably not going to be seeing in the near future. Moving on over to the Southern Hemisphere, the next names in the Southwestern Indian Ocean are Anna, followed by Batsire. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty. And in the South Pacific, it's Cody. We'll be back for another live Truck Weather Bulletin or some kind of standalone Truck Weather Bulletin tomorrow night. More live events are planned. Stay tuned.
Stay safe.